70 years of teaching experience.
More than 12,000 graduates.
One of the largest theological library.
Multicultural student body.
Qualified and experienced national and international faculty.
Special focus on developing skills in spiritual formation.
Tailor-made curriculum for everyone and anyone.
Blended learning methods.
Are you the one who has the passion, drive, and willingness to join this elite community?
Join Hindustan Bible Institute and College to be developed as God-class transformational leaders. Let's change the world.
Wanting to make a difference with your life? We want to invite you to come and join Hindustan Bible Institute and College, where we can pour into your life that you may be developed into what we call a God-class transformational leader to change the world with His love.
Come join us.
Title of the paper, Cyrus, Anointed to Liberate, a socio-rhetorical reading of Isaiah 45, 1-7. Historians refer to Cyrus as the most amiable of the conquerors and the first emperor who found his empire on generosity instead of violence and tyranny. At one point, he controlled one of the greatest empires even ever seen, the modern-day Iran. Although he was known to be a great conqueror, Cyrus the Great is the best remembered for his unprecedented tolerance, magnanimous attitude towards those he defeated. The Hebrew Bible, especially the book of Isaiah, terms him as the anointed one of Yahweh, who was chosen to liberate the people of Israel from the Babylonian exile and to bring them back to their homeland, especially to rebuild their city and the temple. An overall restoration to the Israelite community was offered through him. This piece of work is an attempt to revisit Isaiah 45, 1-7 with the help of socio-rhetorical approach and to trace out the significance of his call to be the liberator of the people. Some methodological considerations or explanation with regard to the method that has been used here, socio-rhetorical interpretation. Socio-rhetorical interpretation is a multi-dimensional approach to texts guided by a multi-dimensional logic. Rather than being one more method for interpreting text, socio-rhetorical interpretation is an interpretive analytic, an approach that evaluates and reorients its strategies as it engages in multifaceted dialogue with the text and the other phenomena that come with our view. This means it invites methods and methodological results into environment of its activities, but those methods and the results are always under scope. Using insights from socio-linguistics, semiotics, rhetoric, ethnography, literary studies, social sciences, cognitive science, and ideological studies, socio-rhetorical interpretation enacts an interactive, interpretive analytic that juxtaposes and interrelates phenomena by drawing and redrawing boundaries of analysis and interpretation. The approach uses a transmodern philosophical position of relationalism to interrelate ancient, modern, and postmodern systems of thought with one another. Cognitive theory concerning conceptual blending and culture geography theory concerning places and spaces guide socio-rhetorical interpretation of pictorial scenes and argumentation that discourse evokes through the ears and eyes of the hearers and readers. Thus, the socio-rhetorical method offers an umbrella approach where interpretive methods of various disciplines are housed and allowed to interact with each other. What are the sources that we have with regard to the period of Persian rule? In the context of the biblical studies, the term Persian period is usually taken to refer to the time when the ancient Persians were in power throughout the ancient Near East, that is the ancient West Asia. These early Persians are also referred to us as Achaemenids, after the eponymous ancestor first named in inscriptions by Darius I and later mentioned by Herodotus. This first world empire began with Cyrus II's conquest of his fellow Iranians, that is the Babylon, the Medes, in about 550 BCE and came to an end in 330 BCE. With the death of Darius III, following the incursion of Alexander of Macedon, and his Greek forces, at its greatest extent, the Persian Empire stretched from Libya and the river Danube in the west to the Indus River Sogdiana in the east. Cyrus's victory over Nabonidus of Babylon in 539 BCE and the resultant release of Hebrews from the Babylonian exile gave him significant standing in several biblical books, which also refer to subsequent Persian kings and rule. These texts include Deutero-Isaiah, Haggai, Zechariah, 1 to 8, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, and the book of Daniel. Several of the biblical books set in the Achaemenid period are thought by scholars to have redacted during the early period of the Second Iranian Empire, that of the Parthians. Under ancient Persian rule, many Jews returned from exile to the province that became known as Ehud or Judah. The second temple was built in Jerusalem, and new theological concepts began to appear in texts. Outside Ehud, early Achaemenid era Aramic materials from the Jewish garrison of Elephantine in Egypt provide insights into the life of the Jewish community there. The time frame from Cyrus's entry to Babylon through the reconstruction of the city of Jerusalem and its temple in the incursion of Alexander is denoted by biblical scholars as the post-exilic period or restoration period. Moving on to detailed or a few insights with regard to what has happened in Judah and the Babylonian exile and how Cyrus emerged as the Persian ruler and also a dominating figure in the ancient world. Since the biblical accounts are not adequate to trace the background of Judean exile, the Babylonian records and the archaeological evidence serve to sketch a considerable image of the situation of the Israelites during the exilic period. Judah, which was a minor state located between Egypt and Babylon, had always been disturbed and crushed due to the political and military tensions between the two powerful kingdoms in the ancient Near East. The Babylonian army besieged Judah in 597 BCE as Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, revolted against Nebuchadnezzar, which resulted in the deportation of part of the Judean population to Babylon. The subsequent revolt in the following years against Babylonian rule led to the complete devastation of Jerusalem in 587 or 586 BCE and also resulted in the deportation of another group of Jews to Babylon as exile. A third deportation took place connected to the murder of Gedaliah in 582 BCE. Approximately 1/4 of the Jewish population was taken as captives to Babylon, and a large number of people perished or fled to Egypt or other parts of ancient Near Eastern area due to the final destruction of Jerusalem. This disastrous condition is marked as the worst traumatic situation in the history of Israel. Based on the archaeological evidence, one can assume that the social, economic, and religious conditions of the remnants in Judah collapsed due to the widespread desolation, but some view that the deportations did not completely affect Judah. However, the ruined condition of Judah, which was not suitable to inhabit, and the absence of a ruler and the political threats from neighboring nations, especially after 582 BC, depict the barely and poor living conditions of the remnants. In contrast to the ruined condition of the cities and absence of leadership in Judah, the Israelites in Babylon were settled in different cities, and to a certain extent, they had leaders to guide them in a foreign land. They were settled in different levels of the Babylonian society, making comfortable livelihood as bureaucrats, businessmen, and also as craftsmen. It is explicit that the difficulties which Judean exiles faced in Babylon were on psychological and religious grounds and on social or economic ones. Therefore, due to the diminishing hope among the Judean exiles in the Babylonian regarding the return to their homeland, different groups opted for different solutions. Many opted to be assimilated within the Babylonian society and culture, even to the extent of losing their own Jewish identity, while those with more affinity to their ethnic and religious identity struggled to preserve the same in their new land, that is Babylon. The constant dominance of Babylonian power in the ancient Near Eastern context came to an end due to the political stability of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Three main factors contributed to the fall of Babylonian rule. Namely, the strong religious factor was the Marduk priesthood, strongly opposed by Nabonidus for his claim for the moon god Sin in preference of Marduk. On the economic grounds, the Babylonian merchants witnessed their markets being disrupted and they earnestly desired a new empire which would renew and evaluate their market's stability. And finally, the foreigners living in Babylon felt chances of returning home where it would be better to be under any rule rather than the present establishment. Thus, Persian King Cyrus, who was welcomed by the powerful priesthood of Marduk, took control over Babylonian Empire in 539 BCE. Hence, the Judean exiles were revived and hoped for a national restoration. Moreover, the Persian policy of tolerance toward the exiled people renewed their hope. However, after the Cyrus edict, few were interested in returning to Judah since they had established their livelihood in Babylon, and also the successive generations who were not aware of and had nothing invested in Judah were not ready to return and start their livelihood from scratch. A great number of Jews decided to remain in Babylon. Even with Cyrus's support, the temple to Yahweh never became a reality immediately, but was dedicated in 515 BCE during the reign of Darius I. There were widespread revolts during the early days of Darius' rule, and since Babylon was ravaged for months, the Jewish exiles gradually returned to Palestine. The historical background of the completion of reconstruction of the Jerusalem temple took place during the early periods of Darius' rule under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Joshua. Therefore, in this historical background, the prophet addressed the Jews who were exiled in Babylon and also to the remnants in Judah and who had suffered immensely between 540 to 500 BC. Most of the Jews had never seen their homeland, especially those who were in Babylon. Their circumstances led them to doubt whether God still loved the Israelites and whether they still had any future. Others wondered whether God of Israel was really the creator of the world and thus powerful enough to defeat the Babylonian rulers and their God. In the midst of these settled queries, the prophet attempted to present that God will liberate the people and he can also choose anyone, even a non-Israelite, to liberate the people of Israel. So with this background, we can just look at the text and the comments that were given by various scholars and then move on to emphasize or underline that God can choose anyone to be the liberator of his people or any other group. A study of Isaiah 45, 1 to 7, especially with the help of the rhetorical reading. So the background has been set for Deutero-Isaiah, and in this condition, let us see what this passage has to offer to the people who were in exile. Thus says Yahweh to his anointed, to Cyrus. Earlier, Yahweh said of Cyrus, he is my shepherd and shall perform all my pleasure. Now he is addressed as the anointed one. The Old Testament tells us of anointing of priests in various references, like in Exodus, 1 Samuel, 2 Kings, and as that kings and the prophets or priests were anointed by God for various offices. The anointing ceremony, typically involving the pouring of oil on the anointed person's head, sets the person apart from the role or task to which Yahweh has called that person. This implies that Yahweh has not only set the person apart for the job at hand, but will also provide the means to carry it out. This is the only occasion in the Old Testament where Yahweh anoints someone other than a Jew. This anointing of Cyrus announces that Yahweh is free to choose a non-Israelite to accomplish his purposes, that Yahweh's tent is larger than to accommodate those outside the chosen people. Several scholars equate anointed in this word with Messiah because of the Hebrew word which was used, which I didn't quote here, Mashiach. Brueggemann, in the most explicit saying, says that the translation anointed is a rendering of the noun anointed one, that is Messiah. which is translated into Greek as Christ, Christos. That is, in the Old Testament phrasing, this non-Israelite is the Christ, the royal designee to enact the salvific intention of Yahweh. For 47 years, the exiles had been looking west towards the home, towards Jerusalem. Now suddenly they hear that God's new designated one, the king to win their battles for them, will not be of the line of David at all, but rather someone from far to east who does not speak a word of Hebrew, whose right hand I have held. For most men, the right hand is the dominant hand, the strong hand, the hand that wields a sword, the fighting hand. As a result, the right hand is a symbol of power and authority. To use one's right hand to grasp another person's hand renders temporarily vulnerable. So, grasping right hand becomes a gesture of trust and intimacy. Yahweh grasps Cyrus's hand, bestowing power and authority to accomplish the task for which Yahweh has chosen Cyrus, to subdue nations before him and to strip kings of their armor. To strip kings of their robes is both to remove their symbol of power and humiliate them. Yahweh has chosen Cyrus to subdue nations and their kings. Cyrus will conquer many lands, including Medes, Croesus of Lydia, a number of Greek cities, Parthia, and India. However, the specific purpose for which Yahweh has anointed him is to defeat Babylon and to set the Jewish exiles free. The Babylonians have been Yahweh's instruments to punish the exiles. Cyrus will be Yahweh's instrument to set them free, to open the doors before him, and the gates shall not shut. The kings that Cyrus will subdue cannot hide behind the closed doors, because Yahweh will force the doors open. I will go before you and make the rough places smooth. Mountains constitute a serious obstacle for any military enterprise. Crossing mountains with military equipment is a slow and difficult task that can quickly turn deadly if the weather turns bad or enemy uses mountainous defensive positions wisely. But Yahweh will level the mountains that might otherwise prevent Cyrus from carrying out his appointed task. Cyrus can move forward boldly, knowing that Yahweh is preparing his way. I will break the doors of brass in pieces and cut apart the bars of iron. Herodotus said of Babylon, there are 100 gates in the circuit of the wall, all of bronze with bronze uprights and lintels. Babylon was also guarded with iron bars, doors of bronze, and bars of iron and formidable barrier. In those earlier times, Cyrus would have access to explosives or ethine-cutting torches that would make short work of bronze and iron defenses. Swords would be of no use against such defenses. A military commander faced with doors of bronze and bars of iron would either have to find another way to enter or would have to gain entrance by deception. There would be little hope of going through locked doors of bronze or bars of iron, but Yahweh promises Cyrus that he needs not concern himself with breaching these seemingly impregnable defenses. Yahweh will break the doors in pieces and cut the bars of iron. The people inside the defenses will be totally at Cyrus's mercy. I will give you the treasures of darkness and the hidden riches of secret places. Even defeating a king does not ensure that the conqueror will find the king's hidden treasure. Palaces can have false walls so that the spaces behind those walls serve as hiding places. The earth provides a nearly infinite number of places where a person might dig a hole to hide treasure. A person might even submerge gold or jewels under the water in a river or lake. Who would find them there? But just as Yahweh will level mountains and open doors, he will also locate hidden treasures and give them to Cyrus. Cyrus will win great treasure when he conquers Babylon, and he will win more great treasure when he conquers Sardis. Next paragraph. Cyrus surely has a strong self-image and will understand that he is a capable military man. However, now he will see that by God's grace, opposition melts before him. In the battles that he has fought so far, he has had to use all his cunning and strength to achieve victory. In the future, that is, when he occupied Babylon. Yahweh will make it easy. In fact, Yahweh will do things that he has promised. According to some scholars, in 539 BCE, Cyrus occupied Babylon. In a way, we can see that Cyrus was welcomed by the Babylonian um, God's priest, that is Marduk's priest, because he introduced another god, which is sin god, against the Babylonian god. In a way, he was able to uh, approach and defeat Babylon with the help of Yahweh, according to the prophecy that is given here in Isaiah 45. The Cyrus letter says, without battle and conflict, he permitted to enter Babylon. Yahweh has set the evidence before him so that it will be possible for him to become a believer. And the book of Ezra opens up with a proclamation by Cyrus that begins, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, Yahweh, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. However, as noted below, Cyrus letter also includes a number of favorable remarks about Marduk the Babylonian. For Jacob, my servant's sake, and Israel, my chosen, I have called you by your name. I surnamed you, though you have not known me. It is a great honor for Yahweh to call Cyrus by name, to anoint him, to grasp his right hand, to make his way easy. But Yahweh does not do these things primarily for the purpose of rewarding Cyrus. Yahweh does these things for Israel's sake. Yahweh has chosen Israel, has covenanted with Israel, has made Israel promises that need to be kept. It is to keep his covenant promises of Israel that Yahweh has elected to honor Cyrus. Yahweh's purpose has to do with Israel. Cyrus is the means to that end. I am Yahweh. I am the Lord is a common statement being found more times in the world. None else. Beside me, there is not anything. A clay cylinder known today as the Cyrus cylinder, which is now resides in the British Museum, includes number of positive references to Marduk, even the Babylonian god. The cylinder says that Marduk chose Cyrus to rule the world, but Yahweh here clarifies that there is no other god than Yahweh. To what extent Cyrus accepted that message is not so clear. It seems quite possible that Cyrus do so after Yahweh does, in fact, level the obstacles and break through the bronze doors, thus bring about easy victories for Cyrus, as indeed Yahweh does. I will strengthen you, though you have not known me. Yahweh gives Cyrus great power. Yahweh does not do this for the purpose of honoring Cyrus, but because Cyrus will be his instrument to free the Jewish exiles and to make possible the rebuilding of the Jerusalem and the temple. That they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is no one besides me. I am Yahweh and there is no one else. Yahweh also makes Cyrus powerful so that people far and wide will know that Yahweh is the one God. The purpose of this kind of witness is not to testify some sort of petty ego need on Yahweh's part. Yahweh's concern is first Israel's salvation and secondly the world's salvation. The world cannot be saved by God whom it does not know. Yahweh will exercise power through Cyrus as a way of revealing himself to people everywhere. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I am Yahweh who does all this. Yahweh has said this. He is the Lord, and that there is no other. Thus, from this passage, we can understand that how significance or importance was given to Cyrus. Some of the views are like Cyrus was chosen by God as his anointed, which was present by some scholars, and some scholars they say that no, he was used as an instrument, so he cannot be compared as Messiah. So I see here Cyrus as a significant figure in the history of Israel, a non-Israelite who became the liberator. Yahweh called a non-Israelite king Cyrus as his anointed one. Cyrus is called as God's Messiah. Yahweh consecrates Cyrus as the mediator of his people and equips him as a servant. Often it has been understood that Cyrus has been anointed as the king, which is derived from the Jewish understanding and not intended anything particularity in the royalty of Cyrus, except that he was raised up by Yahweh for a special purpose. There are also interpretations that Cyrus is the Messiah, which is equated with the term Christ in the New Testament. This is very unique that Cyrus is called as the Anointed One. The same kind of usage can be seen in the case of Nebuchadnezzar, who was also called as God's servant or my servant. This is against the Deuteronomistic law that the Israelites must not appoint any non-Israelites as their king. In the Old Testament, the term anointed is never used except that for a reigning king. Whether or not the reference to Cyrus in Isaiah 44:28 and 45:1 underscores him as the Messiah, the anointed liberator called by Yahweh to liberate his people from the exile. The Deutero-Isaiah have seen Cyrus as the agent of Yahweh, with the significance of underscoring him as the chosen anointed liberator. It can be understood that Yahweh has strengthened Cyrus by grasping his hand. The doors and gates will be open for him, and he will face no hindrances, and he will have a Himalayan victory because God has strengthened him. God goes before his anointed to make way for Israel. Israel is called to function as a witness and messenger on that stage. Although there are interpretations to nullify the role of Cyrus to a mere instrument of God, there is a strong ideological shift and emphasis given by Deutero-Isaiah from a particularistic worldview to a universalistic worldview, where Yahweh is breaking the confined understanding of Israel and underscores that Yahweh can appoint anyone to bring liberation not only to Israelites but also to those who are oppressed. In fact, it was the Babylonians who were first liberated by Cyrus, and then the Israelites and the other people who were under the control of Babylonian rule. Moreover, Cyrus's actions depict him not only as a liberator but also as restorer and builder, where he assisted the Israelites not only to return to their homeland but to rebuild their city and temple, that is, restoration and reconstruction of the Israelite community. To conclude, the above lines were an attempt to revisit Isaiah 45:1-1 and understand the role of Cyrus, the non-Israelite liberator, who was used by Yahweh as an instrument to liberate the people of Israel from their Babylonian exile. In spite of the traditional interpretations which minimize the significance of Cyrus only as an agent of Yahweh, Isaiah 45:1-7 presents him as the anointed one of God, the Messiah, Christ, who was chosen to liberate the people of Yahweh. When the people of Yahweh were expecting for a Messiah from their own people, God has chosen a non-Israelite to liberate his people. God's contamination of the particularistic attitude and the emphasis of universalistic importance has been explicitly and implicitly present in this passage. Thus, it is a clarion call to the readers of this passage to understand that God can choose anyone from anywhere, irrespective of anyone's background, to accomplish his mission of liberating the oppressed and the marginalized, and for which God offers the messianic title to anyone whom he chooses to be the liberator. Thank you so much for your kind attention.